So, what happens to a life that's, well, lived without any real purpose? A life driven only by our desires. Today, we're going to dive into an ancient text, the Śrīmad Bhagavatam, where a king asks this very question to a council of wise sages. And their answer? Well, it's a spiritual roadmap that has literally evolved over thousands of years.
All right, here's our game plan. We're going to follow the structure of the text itself. We'll start with the king's big question, the problem. Then we'll look at the pitfalls the sages warn about. And finally, we'll explore their incredible, evolving solution that spans across the ages.
Okay, let's dive right in. The entire conversation kicks off with a single, super urgent question from a ruler, a man by the name of King Nimi.
And this is it. This is his question. It's the core problem he's trying to get his head around. And, it's a question that never really gets old, does it? What's the end game for a life that doesn't have a spiritual anchor? A life just driven by impulse and wanting more, more, more.
But here's where it gets interesting. The lead sage doesn't just hand him a simple, comforting answer. Nope. Before he even gets to the solution, he paints this really vivid and kind of stark picture of the mindset that leads to the king's problem in the first place.
So what is this downward path? The text lays out a very specific, almost psychological profile of someone who's sort of turned their back on a spiritual life.
The text points to a few key hallmarks of someone who's spiritually adrift. We're talking about a mindset that's just completely eaten up by ego, where things like your wealth or your education actually become barriers instead of tools. And it all leads to this state of hypocrisy, where even sacred things get twisted for selfish reasons.
And this right here is the first big hurdle. Pride. The idea that your own accomplishments can become so blinding that they completely block out any sense of a higher truth or a bigger purpose. And right after pride, you get this incredibly powerful image. Unchecked desire and anger are compared to snakes. Think about it. Volatile, dangerous, totally driven by base instinct rather than any kind of higher thought.
And this kind of thinking doesn't just stay bottled up inside, it spills out. It leads people to actually mock and ridicule those who are on a genuine spiritual path, like the devotees of Lord Asucha, which is another name for the divine. It just creates this deeper and deeper separation.
It's a really sobering conclusion to this section. The sage makes it crystal clear that a life built on that stuff, on pride, on anger, on hypocrisy, is just fundamentally unstable. It's like a castle built on sand, right? It's inevitably going to get shattered by time.
Okay, so this is where everything pivots. King Nimi has heard the diagnosis, he gets the problem, and now he immediately wants the cure. And notice he's not asking for some one-size-fits-all answer. He specifically asks, how does the solution change over time?
And the sage's answer is honestly fascinating. He explains that the path to spiritual connection isn't some fixed, unchanging thing. It actually adapts. It evolves through these different cosmic ages, or yugas, to perfectly suit the people living in that specific time.
All right, this timeline here is really the heart of the whole solution. And if you look closely, you can see this incredible progression. Notice how the method changes? We go from this intense solitary meditation way back in the Satya Yuga to these huge, elaborate public rituals, and then finally to something way more communal and accessible. In our current age, the Kali Yuga, congregational chanting.
So you see the pattern, right? The key takeaway here is this move towards accessibility. The whole process goes from something that required immense personal discipline, done all alone, to practices that are way more social, open, and frankly, easier for most people to perform.
Okay, now we get to our current age, the Kali Yuga, and the text throws a real curveball here, something you probably wouldn't expect.
Now this is what's so wild. The Kali Yuga is almost always described as the most spiritually degraded age, full of conflict and confusion. But here, the sage says that truly wise people actually celebrate it. And why? Because the path to liberation becomes astonishingly simple and direct. And this practice has a name, Sankirtana. This is pointed to as the main sacrifice for our time. And the focus is all about it being collective, out loud, and joyful. Not some complicated, silent, internal struggle.
And the benefits are spelled out really clearly. For all of us kind of wandering souls in this confusing modern age, this practice is presented as the path from darkness to light, the most powerful method for finding supreme peace and ending that cycle of struggle. All right, so for the final section, the dialogue zooms out to talk about the raw power of consciousness itself. The point is that where you put your mind is the ultimate game changer, sometimes in ways that are pretty shocking. And to really hammer this point home, the sage gives this, well, honestly, a really startling example, just to show how powerful sheer mental absorption on the divine can be, no matter the reason.
And this just illustrates the principle so brilliantly. The text talks about these enemies of the divine, like a king named Śiśupāla, who were so consumed by hatred that they thought about God constantly, 24/7. And because their minds were so completely absorbed, they actually achieved liberation. So the logic is just inescapable, right? If even enemies who are that focused can get there, what incredible destination awaits those who focus their minds with love?
The sage wraps it all up by laying out the ultimate fruits of a life of devotion. He says that when you truly surrender, you're absolved of all your debts, karmic, societal, you name it, and even more. The divine presence inside your own heart actively purifies you from past mistakes.
So if we step back and look at the whole journey, it's pretty incredible. We went from a king's very real fear about a lost soul all the way to this beautiful, multi-layered solution. The big takeaway seems to be that not only does a path exist for everyone, but that path actually gets more direct, more accessible, and more merciful as time goes on.
And that leaves us with one last thing to chew on. If the spiritual path for our time is supposedly the easiest one in the whole cosmic cycle, well, what does that simplicity itself demand from us? Perhaps the real challenge isn't complexity, but sincerity. Having the focus and the heart to really engage even when the process seems straightforward. Definitely something to think about.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking a pretty massive intellectual and spiritual leap.
We really are.
Plunging into some incredibly dense source material. We're talking philosophical excerpts, mainly from the 11th canto of these ancient sacred texts.
Yeah, and these aren't just, suggestions. They present a whole cosmic blueprint. Existence, duty, failure, success, all framed by this relentless idea of cosmic time.
It's a lot. We're basically listening in on a conversation about the biggest questions, aren't we?
That's a good way to put it. It starts with this figure, King Nimi, asking two great sages, Kamasa and Karabajan, some really fundamental things.
He's demanding answers, like real answers about spiritual reality, destiny.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our mission for you today, the listener trying to follow along, is to, quickly grab the core insights from this deep philosophical chat.
We're focusing on two huge themes. First, a pretty chilling look at spiritual failure. Like, what's the ultimate fate, the nidha, of people who are self-deluded or just totally materialistic?
Right. And second,
we're going to track this massive kind of systematic shift in how the Supreme Lord is worshipped across these four vast cosmic ages, the yugas.
culminating in the method for right now, our current age.
Which the texts say is surprisingly simple yet potent.
It is. And the king kicks it all off with this brilliant two-part question. It's in verse 1. He's not just asking about, obvious sinners.
No, he's sharper than that.
He wants to know the nikah, the ultimate spiritual position, of two really distinct groups. First, those who are supposedly self-realized, the Atma Vitamar, but they don't worship Lord Hari.
So they have the knowledge, maybe the intellectual understanding, but they ignore the source.
Precisely. Failure of intellect, in a way. And the second group,
Those completely consumed by unfulfilled material desires, the Ashanta Kamam.
so failure of the will, or maybe just being overwhelmed by attachment. The king forces the sages to tackle both, the proud intellectual elite and the person just, trapped by wanting stuff.
It's a perfect setup for a deep diagnosis.
Definitely. Let's dive into Kamasa's reply first. He really dissects this spiritual danger of false pride, of disrespecting the divine order.
Okay, so Kamasa starts, interestingly, not with individual flaws, but with the big picture. The cosmic structure of duty itself, verses 2 and 3. Why is it so important that the four social and spiritual divisions, the Vartans and Ushamas, didn't just randomly evolve?
Well, it establishes the whole system as divinely ordered right from the start. The source says they arose separately, based on natural qualities, the guy.
Okay.
But they all stem from specific parts of the Supreme Person, the mouth, arms, thighs, feet. It's like saying your duty, your function in the cosmos, is an organic part of this larger divine body.
Right, so if the Vartanses are like limbs, then doing your duty properly means staying connected to the whole thing. Like if I'm a hand, I can't just be obsessed with being a hand and ignore the brain or the heart. That's failing my real job.
Exactly right. And verse 3 highlights a critical failure. It says, those who belong to these divisions but fail to worship the Supreme Person.
The origin, the source of it all.
Yes, the Atma Prabhavam, the direct origin and Lord, the Ajatam of all these divisions. If they fail to worship him and instead disrespect him, they fall.
Fall from their position.
Fall from their rightful position, sanadbrata, and descend into lower states. It's like you said, cutting the limb off from the body. It's not just a social mistake, it's a cosmic break.
Wow. And this break, this spiritual blindness, it manifests in some really specific, unpleasant ways, according to the text.
Oh, definitely. The sources paint a vivid picture of the deluded and sinful. Verses 6 to 9, 14 to 17. Let's dig into the intellectually arrogant types first.
Okay.
Verse 6 talks about the foolish, the murko who think they're learned, the panita manoa.
Know-it-alls.
Sort of, yeah. They might have book smarts, but they fundamentally lack skill in true spiritual action. Karma and akovita, they're not actually effective spiritually, but boy, are they arrogant.
And the text gets specific about how they talk. Eager to utter flattering, sweet words. Kaiokan, what's that about? Is it sucking up to people?
It could be partly that, but maybe it's also enjoying the sound of their own complex talk.
Yeah.
Showing off their jargon, seeking praise for how deep they sound, rather than actually living the wisdom.
Ah, okay. Like the original critique of the puffed-up intellectual. More about sounding smart than being wise.
That nails it, mistaking fancy words for spiritual reality. Then the text shifts gears in verse 7, describing the really hostile type.
Right. These are the ones driven by passion, rajasa, leading to dreadful plans, gorasakupo.
Yeah, they're lustful and wrathful like serpents. Ahimanyava. That serpent image is powerful, isn't it? Quick to strike, venomous.
Defensive.
Defensive, exactly. And hypocritical, dumbiko, sinful. But here's the key spiritual crime they commit. They mock the devoted followers of the Lord. Śiśupāla.
So it's not just indifference, it's active antagonism towards those who are connected.
That's it. Disrespecting the source leads to attacking those who honor it. And where does this hostility often come from? Verse 9 connects it directly to material success.
Ugh, the classic trap. Wicked people, kalo, become blind in their intellect, and hadya, because of pride, smayana, from their achievements.
And the list of achievements is, well, pretty comprehensive. Wealth, shurya, opulence, vidutya, noble birth, abhijanena, education, pridya.
Sounds familiar.
But it doesn't stop there. It also includes pride from renunciation, beauty, strength, even good deeds.
Wait, pride from renunciation, taijina. How can giving things up make you proud and blind? That seems like the opposite should happen.
It's such a sharp insight, isn't it? We think renouncing stuff automatically makes us better. But the text warns that if you do it with arrogance, feeling superior because you've given things up, it just becomes another form of ego. You get proud of your non-attachment.
Wow. So pride, whether it's from your bank balance or your simple clothes, it makes you disrespect the Lord and his genuine devotees, the Hari Priyan.
Exactly. You end up judging everyone based on externals, whether material or spiritual.
So if they're putting all this energy and ego into things that are temporary anyway, what's the end game? What's the spiritual consequence, according to Kamasa?
It's a downward path, basically described as spiritual suicide. Verses 15 to 18 lay it out. First, there's this basic mistake. Confusing the body with the real self. They hate the Lord's presence, the self, inside other people's bodies, parakayo.
Because they can't see the divine in others.
They invest everything, all their affection, not, into dead matter, temporary relationships, stuff.
It's like pouring your life savings into a house you know is going to collapse next week.
Guaranteed loss. The source flat out calls them killers of the soul, atmahana, in verse 17. They fail to get liberation, kaivalyam, because they're stuck chasing temporary goals, dharma, artha, kama.
Okay, we need to pause there. Trivargikar, those three goals.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be stuck in dharma, artha, and kama?
Right, trivargika means the three categories of goals. Dharma is like righteous duty, morality, doing the right thing according to scripture. Arthas is economic success, wealth, security, and kama is sensory pleasure, fulfill desires, including sex.
And these aren't bad in themselves.
Not necessarily. The text acknowledges they're part of life. The problem is when they become the only goal. the ultimate aim.
So spiritual failure is achieving temporary success in duty, wealth, and pleasure and thinking, that's it, I've arrived.
Exactly. And their cherished hopes, Manoratha, all those worldly goals are inevitably destroyed by time. Kaladvasta, it's unavoidable.
And the final consequence.
Verse 18 is pretty stark. Those who are averse to the Lord, Vasudeva, are forced, unwillingly, to give up everything they worked so hard for: homes, kids, money, and they enter into darkness. Dhammavishanti, all that effort, poof, gone. And they're left in darkness. Okay, so we've seen how arrogance and hostility lead to, well, spiritual disaster. But Kamasa also talks about failure that comes from just not understanding pure duty.
Right, back to verse 10. The fools, abutha, they ignore the Lord who's right there, inside everyone like the sky, omnipresent but unseen.
And they don't listen to the scriptures, the Vedas, that glorify him. They prefer idle chatter, mental speculation, manorathanaprathai, basically gossip and philosophical navel-gazing over accessible truth.
Yeah. And this ignorance sets up what might be the most practical ethical point in this whole section, the difference between natural urges and scriptural regulation, verses 11 to 13.
This is so crucial. The sources are super clear. Things like sex, vyavaya, eating meat, amya, and drinking intoxicants, majasava, are natural tendencies for living beings.
Okay, natural. But then it immediately says they are not sanctioned by scripture. Nai tatarkodana, that sounds like a contradiction. If they're natural, why aren't they sanctioned? And why regulate them?
That's the whole point. They're natural to the material body, especially when we're influenced by passion and ignorance. But the scriptures, the kodana, offer a way out of being controlled by those urges. The purpose of regulation, vyavastitya, isn't to say, go ahead, enjoy. It's to control it. Manage it.
Leading eventually to giving it up.
Exactly. Leading ultimately to renunciation. Nivaltrititya. The scripture isn't giving a green light. It's providing a structured, limited way to engage so that over time you realize the pleasure is temporary and you choose to transcend it. It's like weaning yourself off something.
So instead of just saying no, which might make people rebel.
Right, and feel guilty.
Yeah.
It channels the tendency. Through specific rituals like marriage for sex or certain sacrifices involving meat or drink, the act gets restricted, infused with some higher purpose, and severely limited.
Can we look at the examples given, like how restricted?
Sure. For liquor, Suryo, verse 13, says it's sanctioned for ceremonial smelling or maybe a tiny taste, graibaka, not for getting drunk.
Okay, definitely not recreational use.
No. And ritual animal sacrifice by Sharilavhanam is highly regulated. It's not considered violence if, and only if, it's done according to very specific procedures by authorized people for a higher purpose.
And sex.
The big one. Sanctioned only for having children, praja, not for pleasure, naratya. The intention changes everything.
So the goal is always spiritual purity. Vishalam svadharmam. And people just don't get this.
They misunderstand. They see the regulated allowance as a blanket permission slip and just indulge their desires without any spiritual check.
And if they get it wrong, if they indulge without understanding this regulatory purpose.
Verse 14 gives a really graphic consequence. Those proud, unrighteous people who harm animals, pashandoyanti, may be thinking it's okay because of some distorted view of duty or just pure desire.
What happens to them?
After death, those same animals they harmed come back and devour them. It's a very direct, almost literal payback for violence born from misunderstanding duty.
Wow. That's intense. Okay, before we shift to the yugas, I want to go back to something you touched on earlier, the difference between these arrogant opposers and people who are just distant.
Yes, the point about compassion in verse 4. Crucial nuance. The text specifically mentions groups like women, Shudras, and others who, for various reasons, are far from hearing about the Lord, Duharikatha.
And they aren't lumped in with the arrogant mockers.
Not at all. They are specifically called truly worthy of compassion, anagampya, from the devotees.
So the text makes a clear distinction. Being distant because of circumstance or lack of opportunity is very different from active, hostile opposition born of pride.
Exactly. One deserves compassion, the other gets labeled killer of the soul. It matters why someone is disconnected. Okay, so Kamasa has dealt with the fate of the deluded. Now King Nimi asks his second big question. Verse 19. How does the Lord actually appear? What's his form, name, color, and crucially, how is he worshipped across the different cosmic ages, the yugas?
This is huge, right? We're talking potentially billions of years changing human abilities.
Immense scale. And Karbhajana confirms, yeah, Lord Krishna shows up with different complexions, names, forms, and is worshipped using different methods in each age. Kata, Treta, Vapara, and Kali. It's like the divine tailors the path to fit the people of the time.
So we're shifting from moral philosophy to cosmology now, watching the divine adapt over deep time. Let's start with the first age, Satya Yuga or Krita, the Golden Age.
The age of truth, purity. And the Lord's appearance reflects that. Verse 21 describes him as deeply ascetic. Complexion is white. Shukla, symbolizing that purity and knowledge. He's four-armed, Katabahu.
And his look.
Very much the primal sage. Matted hair, jat. Wears tree bark, Vakalumbra on black deerskin, Kajina. He carries the tools for deep inner work. A staff, Dansha, a water pot, Kamantrelu, and prayer beads, Akan. The whole look screams. The path is internal, ascetic.
And the people in Satya Yuga, they must have been capable of that.
Absolutely. Verse 22 says they were peaceful, friendly, no hatred, nirvado, and importantly, equal-minded samo. Very little external drama or conflict.
So the worship method matches them.
Entirely internal. Worship is through intense austerity, tapasa, inner peace, shamina, and sense control, dhammanika. Requires huge focus and self-discipline, which people supposedly had back then, along with very long lives.
And the names used to glorify him reflect this too.
Yes. Verse 23 lists names like Hasa, the swan of discrimination, Yogeshvara, master of yoga, Amala, the pure, Avyakta, the unmanifest, Paramatma, the supreme soul. It's all about the abstract ultimate truth within.
Okay, so that's the peak. What happens next in Treta Yuga?
Well, spiritual capacity starts to decline a bit, so there's a necessary shift, away from purely internal meditation towards more external, elaborate rituals.
And the Lord's appearance changes too.
Dramatically.
Yeah.
Verse 24, now he's reddish in color, Raktavavaraya. Red suggests fire, maybe passion, the energy of sacrifice. Still four-armed, but now he has golden hair, Hiranchakisha, and wears 3 belts, Trimekha.
3 belts. Symbolic.
Likely symbolizing the 3 Vedas. His whole identity is described as Trayatma, the embodiment of the 3 Vedas. And he's visually marked by sacrificial tools, the ladle and spoon, Sruk-Sravad. He looks like the chief priest of the cosmos.
So, because people's inner focus isn't as strong, the spiritual technology shifts. Instead of pure mind control, you use external rituals and objects to achieve the same goal.
That's a great way to put it. The people, verse 25 says, are pious Brahmanjas who know the Vedas, Brahmavadino. They worship Lord Hari, seen as embodying all the demigods, Sarvadeva-mayam, through these complex Vedic rituals, Trivigaya. Mastering the sacrifice becomes the main path.
And the names glorified.
Reflect the focus on sacrifice. Verse 26, Vitvo, Yaya, sacrifice itself, Pinchnigarva, Urukrama, he who performs great deeds. It's all centered around the altar fire and the power of mantra.
Okay, moving on. Dwapara Yuga. Things are getting a bit more complex, more conflict leading into our current age.
Exactly. And the method shifts again.
The Lord's appearance in Dwapara, verse 27 says, dark complexioned Yama. Like Krishna later on.
Right. A majestic, powerful color. He wears yellow clothes, Pitavasa, carries his weapons Nijoidhad. He has divine marks like the Shuvatsa.
And his identity.
He's recognized as a great king, Maharaja Upalaka. The vibe is majestic, royal, approachable through that kind of relationship.
And the worship method, it blends things now.
Yes. Verse 28 says worship is through both Vedas and Tantras. Veda Tantra Paim. This is a key shift. Why bring in Tantra?
Good question. Why Tantra?
It probably reflects a growing need for more accessible, more personalized forms of worship. Vedic sacrifices were huge, complex public affairs. Tantras offered specific mantras, diagrams, yantras, deity forms, things an individual could use to focus their devotion more directly.
So moving from the massive public ritual towards more personalized, image-focused worship.
Seems like it. Mortals, Martio seeking the supreme, Jisyasava, now use mantras and invocations, verses 29 and 30 say, focusing on the Lord's specific divine expansions.
Like the Katurvyuha.
Exactly. Vasudeva, Saukuran, Pradyumna, Aniruddha. These become central. And they glorify him not just abstractly, but as Narāda, the sage, Aye, the Lord of the universe, Vijayvarya, the soul of all beings. It's getting more personal, focused on the divine personality.
Which brings us to now, Kali Yuga. Caravajana signals this shift, asking the king to listen closely about the tantric methods for this final, most challenging age. Verse 31.
And this is where the source gives its most direct and maybe surprising advice for us today.
Let's start with the Lord's appearance in Kali, verse 32. It's immediately paradoxical, right? About the color.
It really is. He's described as blackish in hue, Kadavarcham, which fits the Dark Age idea, but then instantly a correction. His luster, his radiance is non-blackish. Tva'asam.
Meaning?
It's like a sign of hope. He takes on the color of the age, appears within the darkness, but his inner light, his transcendence, shines through. It shows liberation is still possible, even now. And he comes fully equipped with associates, weapons, energies. Sagopagastopadam.
Okay. And the worship method reflects the age's limitations, short attention spans, lots of distractions.
Totally. Intelligent people, Sumethasa, worship him mainly through the sacrifice of congregational chanting. Sakirtana Praya Yajna.
Just chanting. Why is that considered superior to the intense austerity of Satyuga or the complex rituals of Treta?
Because the barrier to entry is lowest, but the power is, paradoxically, the highest for this age. We generally lack the mental control for Satya Yuga meditation.
Right.
We lack the deep learning needed for Treta Yuga's sacrifices. We might lack the unwavering focus for Dwapara's deity worship. But so Kirtana, chanting the holy names together,
Requires less.
requires no special materials, no PhD in theology, and you can even do it while distracted. It's designed for the conditions of Kali Yuga.
And this simplicity is why the text actually praises Kali Yuga, verses 36-37, which sounds weird, given its bad reputation.
It does sound weird, but noble, wise souls, Aryat, honor this age. Why? Because they know how to find the essence, the Sara. They respect Kali because the highest goal, Sarvasvarta and supreme peace, Paramashanti, are achieved just by Sankirtana. The efficiency is off the charts.
So the spiritual bang for your buck is highest now. Minimal input, maximum output.
That's basically it. Verse 37 says it plainly. For souls wandering around in this difficult world, the Hinabramyatam, there is no greater gain. This simple process destroys the whole cycle of birth and death. Sasalsinashati. The other ages needed massive effort. This one offers a direct line.
Wow. And the text even points to specific places where this devotion takes root more easily, verses 38-40.
Yeah, it suggests the path is helped by certain environments. It says, beings from the earlier pure ages actually want to be born in Kali Yuga because of this easy opportunity.
Really? They want to come here?
Apparently. And these truly devoted souls, Narayan, tend to appear especially in the Dravis lands, South India.
And it names specific rivers there. Tamarapard, Katamala, Payasvini, Kaveri. Why list the rivers?
It connects the devotion to the place.
Yeah.
The source says people who drink the water from these rivers tend to become pure-hearted devotees of Vasudeva, Amalashe. It's like the land itself carries a spiritual vibration that helps purify you, making Sankirtana feel more natural.
The environment helps the heart.
Okay, so we've covered failure, the march of time, the path for today. Now the text hits the absolute peak, total surrender. And this part has some really radical ideas about duty.
Radical how? Verse 41 talks about freedom from obligations.
It's revolutionary in any society. It says, the person who completely surrenders, Savarmana Sharagata, to Lord Mukunda, the giver of liberation.
And consciously rejects other duties. Parihuti Kirtam.
Yes. That person is declared no longer a debtor or a servant, Nakikranayam, to basically anyone. Demigods, sages, ancestors, prana, other living beings, relatives, even humanity in general.
Hold on. If you just surrender, you're free from all debts. To your family, to society. Doesn't that sound like a loophole? Like someone could just say, I surrender, and then ditch all their responsibilities.
That's the immediate practical worry, isn't it? But the text assumes that true, complete surrender, sarvatmana, changes your very nature. Someone genuinely surrendered doesn't need external rules to be good. Their inner purification makes them act rightly towards everyone anyway.
Ow.
Because their one relationship with the Supreme Source implicitly covers all other relationships. The Lord is in everyone's heart, so by serving the Source, you're indirectly serving everyone.
Okay, so focusing purely on the transcendent takes care of the worldly duties automatically through a purified mindset. That focus must be incredibly powerful internally.
Hugely powerful. Verse 42 says that surrender is so potent. The Lord himself, Hari, living in the heart, Hari Sanivid, personally destroys all your past bad karma, the karma. No matter how it happened, that's it. If you just worship his feet and give up other attachments, Saktanya Bawasha, he wipes the slate clean.
He takes responsibility for your past.
Directly. And then the source gives this beautiful personal example, Vasudeva and Devaki, Krishna's parents, showing purification not through complicated rituals, but just through love.
How do they get purified, verses 46-47?
Simply by loving Krishna as their son, Putra Sneham. The text lists the ordinary intimate things. Just seeing him, darshana, hugging him, alyogana, talking with him, all by eating with him, resting with him. Jnana son of Ajane, the Supreme Lord, Yeshvara, hid his power. Gusha Aishwari acted like their child and purified them instantly through that parental love.
That's beautiful, but then comes the most, I don't know, mind-bending part. The paradox of enmity, verses 48 to 50. The idea that even hating God, if done with enough focus, can be spiritually effective. Let's unpack that.
This really flips our usual ideas about good and bad, doesn't it? It talks about kings like Śiśupāla, Pauṇḍraka, Śālva. They achieved oneness with the Lord, Tatsamam, the same goal devotees strive for. But they got there through pure, focused hatred.
They hated Krishna constantly.
Every waking moment, their minds were obsessed with his every move, his glances, even when they were just sitting or resting. But it was all driven by enmity, Vertia. The emotion was negative, absolutely toxic, but the focus, total, absolute.
So the intensity of the absorption mattered more than the quality of the emotion.
That seems to be the radical point here. The sheer intensity of focus on the divine form trumped the negative feeling behind it, and the text uses this mainly as a contrast. If even that works, what then to speak of those who are lovingly devoted? Punchline.
Ah, okay. So if intense negative focus leads to liberation, then positive loving focus must be even more powerful and, frankly, a much nicer path.
Infinitely nicer, yes. The path of enmity is painful, dangerous, requires dedicating your whole being to negativity. The path of devotion is joyful, purifying, uses the soul's natural love. The destination might be similar oneness, but the journey couldn't be more different. The text only brings up the enemies to show the incredible power of simply paying attention to the divine.
It's the focus itself that's key, the absolute absorption.
That seems to be the mechanism. And bringing it back to Vasudeva and Devaki, verse 50 tells them, don't just think of him as your son. Mapati him akata. That's the final step. Move from love to recognizing the reality behind the form.
He's the eternal supreme soul, Sarvabhumani Ujjhare, who just appeared that way to do his work.
Exactly. To relieve the earth's burden, deal with negativity, protect the good, and ultimately grant liberation, seeing the transcendent within the apparent.
And hearing all this?
Vasudeva and Devaki got it. They gave up their illusion, mohamapana. And the text ends with this promise, verse 52. Anyone who attentively remembers this whole sacred story gets purified from contamination, shamala, and becomes qualified for the highest state, brahmabhyuya kalpate. Just listening properly purifies you and makes you fit for liberation. #Aoteoro.
Wow. Okay, we have covered some serious ground today, guided by these sages, Kamasa and Kurobhajana. We went from this really stark definition of spiritual failure.
Rooted not just in mistakes, but in pride. Pride over worldly stuff, even pride over spiritual practices.
Yeah. All the way to this incredible cosmic dance through time.
Charting how the path itself changes. From the intense inner focus of Satya Yuga.
To the complex rituals of Treta.
And landing on the, well, unique simplicity of chanting together, Sankirtana in our age, Kali Yuga. The sources are pretty clear. The easiest path available now actually gives the highest reward.
And we got that crucial distinction. Scriptural rules about things like sex or food aren't a license to indulge. They're regulations designed to lead you away from indulgence towards renunciation.
A controlled process towards purity, moving beyond those temporary goals of dharma, artha, and kama.
But maybe the most startling idea to sit with is about focus. That paradox of enmity.
Right. The idea that total absorption in the divine, just fixing your mind completely, is the key catalyst. Even if the feeling driving it is negative, like Śiśupāla's hatred.
It's just mind-blowing.
It really is. So here's the final thought for you, the listener. If the universe works in such a way that absolute focus, even negative focus, can lead to the ultimate goal, what does that say about your focus?
Where's your attention going day to day?
If you're spending your mental energy scattered on trivial things, on constant distraction, are you basically wasting the most powerful tool you have, your attention?
That's definitely something to think about as you navigate, well, the challenges and opportunities of this age.